So, we start off with what is poverty?
We decided that, we have a problem with poverty obviously all around the world and in the United States, so we kind of have to define the problem. And what we came up with is, the state of one who lacks a usual or socially acceptable amount of money or material possessions. We decided that that doesn't really do all of it, so according to United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, they define absolute poverty as the amount of money needed for food, shelter, and clothing. Once again, that doesn't really do all the justice. That fails to deal with broader quality of life issues that are socially and culturally needs as well. So that doesn't really deal with the broad spectrum of poverty. So relative poverty, that's people that are poor if they fall below a prevailing standard of living in a socio-economic context. So the ideal situation, we all know what the ideal situation is. That has to do with happiness, security, and assets, kind of the American dream. That has to do with, having an opportunity to be happy, an opportunity to be secure financially, and when it comes to food, and a house, and assets, having all that together. So that's kind of the American dream, and everybody should have an equal opportunity for that.
So Josh just explained the ideal situation and how it should be, but we're pretty far from that here in the U.S. Just to give you a little bit of background on what it's like here, 46.7 million people are in poverty. 15.5 million of these people are children under the age of 18. 4.6 million are seniors over 65, and the overall poverty rate is 15.3%. So as you can see, we still have a long way to go.
Narrowing it down a little and kind of bringing it back home, Ohio has a poverty rate of 15.8%, and the child poverty rate, which is defined as a person 18 or younger, is 24%, and the women in poverty rate is 16.7%. Within Stark County, 15.4% of people are living in poverty, which means that if they are a single person, they have an income less than $11,484. So that study was actually done in 2014. So that number is fairly recent. And in Alliance alone, out of 20,221 people, 5,437 people are living in poverty.
So we broke it down into 3 root causes. There's more causes, but we thought these 3 covered a lot of the minor issues and they pertain to education. So there's family issues, economic problems, and discrimination. As far as family issues, it depends on like single parent, 2-parent, or grandparent households. In Alliance, there's 34% of kids are in a single parent home, and in the state of Ohio, it's 36%. So about 1 in 3 live with just one parent. And there's no statistic for how many live with grandparents in Alliance, but in the state of Ohio, it's 197,000 live with their grandparents. So this brings stress to both the children and the guardians. With like income, they might rely on only one, or the grandparents might be retired and not have any, or there might be family drama with the parents that aren't in this situation, and but then there's also parents' education level. As the children get higher into their education, if their parents aren't educated, it's harder to help them with their homework when they're at home, and they don't have anyone to go to for questions. And as we have more programs with like take your device to school, or everyone gets an iPad, then if the parents aren't very tech savvy, then they have issues like that. Or grandparents might not have Wi-Fi and the children can't do their homework at school or at home.
So Jenny just touched on one of the major root causes of family. I'm going to touch on the economic and financial limitations that are obviously a big factor in poverty. So poverty can be defined as supporting a family of 3 on less than $18,550 a year, or a family of 4 on less than $24,230 a year. And so, as you can imagine, this can be attributed to the lack of quality jobs in the U.S., Additionally, economic factors can affect nutrition. And according to an article I found, food selection when living in poverty narrows items to like food selection items that provide the most energy at the lowest cost. So these are often like just convenience items, and they can cause nutrient deficiencies and malnutrition on one end of the spectrum. But on the other end, they can also cause obesity. So this is a major problem, and they can affect school performance as well.
So I want to talk about discrimination. We have discrimination all over the world and in America, and unfortunately, it's in our classrooms as well. According to the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of Education, they did a study a few years ago. They took statistics from every single school district in the country. They found that minorities are being suspended more than 3 times as likely as their white counterparts, and they found that this is a problem. So, like, some discrimination things that have happened in classrooms is that, you know, they may have a black student and a white student who have like no bad thing on the permanent record. Black student does the same thing as white student. Black student may get 2 days in school suspension as the white may get like 1. That's a problem. It's not good for the learning environment that's supposed to be an equal opportunity for everybody. And this can lead to, like I said, school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, expulsions. And that leads to school avoidance, diminished academic engagement, so they're not going to want to show up if they're not being treated fairly. If they are here, they're probably not paying attention, so that's not good for the learning environment. This can lead to dropping out of the system, and that leads to substance abuse and poverty. So, like I said, the U.S. Department of Justice and Education did a joint study on this. We thought it was very important. And discrimination in school and enforcement policies of exclusionary disciplinary policies, it's not helping the students, it leads to poverty, and that's a problem.
So education is more than reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's one of the most important investments a country can make in its people and its future, and it's also critical to reducing poverty and inequality. Education gives people critical skills and tools to help them better provide for themselves and their families, and it creates opportunities for sustainable economic growth now and in the future. Education can also help fight the spread of HIV and AIDS and other diseases. It reduces mother and child mortality, and it helps improve health. Education encourages transparency, good governance, sustainability, and helps fight against the graft and corruption. So poverty makes it more difficult for children to succeed in school. These students tend to have more needs than the middle class or well-off peers. Consider children from a poor family. They're behind in all of their counterparts, nearly every measure of academic achievement. And then you want to look even deeper and note that the children living in poverty often come to school without breakfast, having enough sleep. They often experience violence, abuse, and secondhand smoke, neglect, poor clothing, and shoes. Even though they have limited experience in the world, they may not be able to pay for field trips. They cannot pay for extracurricular activities of any kind, which could also expand their experience base. This is frightening reality for many millions of teachers and children. Now we're going to go ahead and look at some of the statistics of education and poverty. Between the ages of 16 and 24, of low-income families, they are 7 times more likely to drop out. And 40% of children living in poverty aren't prepared for primary schooling. There is a higher number of absenteeism and leaving school altogether because they're more likely to go out in the real world, care for their families, and bring that income in. And then a better educated workforce is obviously brings in a higher earning. And education as it's by itself cannot cure poverty because, as we stated in that past couple of slides, there's more than just education and the knowledge of poverty.
Now for our action plan, we're gonna take a quick second to look at this website right here. This is actually from the Ohio Department of Education, and it is the funding for Alliance City Schools. So you can see it breaks it down over here. It's source of funds by the local, state, and federal level, and it tells you how much money Alliance City Schools are getting from each of those levels. Dr. Salvatore actually questioned us about the funding, so we decided it was a good idea to bring this in. But if we actually look back at Alliance City Schools' report card as well, you can see their grades are not where they should be by the Ohio Department of Education. So from looking at the grades that they received on their report card and their funding, we decided that we wanted to do low-cost action plans so they could still put their money in other places and strengthen the areas that are on the report card. So to start out with our action plan, Kristen is going to talk about service learning.
So service learning is a teaching and learning strategy that integrates meaningful community service with reflection and instruction. It teaches civic responsibility and strengthens communities. Some topics that could be touched within this type of learning would be philanthropic topics, educational reform, as well as poverty and homelessness. Some of the community service placements could be any soup kitchens, aiding a teacher, or mentoring a child or tutoring a child, or even helping at a senior citizens center. This kind of learning is not only helps the individual that gets to learn about these topics that we don't really necessarily teach in the real world or in a different type of setting, but it helps the students to become more diverse, and it also helps the community enrichment.
Our next idea we had was after-school programs. Alliance already actually has after-school programs. It's called Navigators, and they are in all elementary schools, the intermediate school, the middle school, and actually the high school. Within these after-school programs, they have enrichment time, they have an afternoon snack, because as we've mentioned before, sometimes those kids will not eat again until they get to school the next day, and rec time. Our idea though with the after-school program was strengthening it, and instead of having just like enrichment time, maybe having some one-on-one tutors that could easily be college student, like education majors, or anyone that would want to volunteer, even teachers that would want to stay after, and give the students the extra attention they need if they're struggling in a certain area. Our next idea was mentor program. This is actually already put in stone with Alliance and Mount Union. There are Alliance High School seniors that students at the University of Mount Union can actually mentor and encourage them to go to college and continue their education, and they are there for that student to answer any questions that they could possibly have about college or anything in general. We were thinking this mentor program can go down to the middle school, because the middle school is a crucial time to get students to be engaged in learning, because that's where their development is growing. And then Jessica is now going to talk about meals during the summer and weekend backpacks.
Alright, so as we already touched on, for some kids, the meals they get at school, like breakfast and lunch, that's the only meal they're gonna have all day. And so we thought providing a meal program during the summer would be a good option, and weekend backpacks just to get these kids through the weekend with like food and clothing, and just things like that, just simple necessities that they might not have at home. And so in order to assess who's at risk for food insecurity, we would send home a food insecurity questionnaire that's adapted from the CDC and the Cornell Radner insecurity questionnaire. And so there's 3 questions, and the parents would answer these often true, sometimes true, or never true. The first question is, I worry whether my food will run out before I get money to buy more. Second, I worry about whether the food I can afford to buy for my family will be enough. And then lastly, the food I buy just doesn't last and I don't have money to get more. So if the parents answer positively to any of those questions, their children would be considered at risk for food insecurity and would be eligible for these programs.
Okay. For academic offerings, we thought it extends from AP courses to interventions and early literacy. And offering more AP courses will allow students to study a wider, broad areas in their classroom, such as anatomy, and getting college credits for that. Within Alliance, AP students get an iPad mini. So that's a big step, and they technically have their AP classes for 12th grade students. So that's a big step. And then on the other end, interventions is really big too, because there are those students who are going to be struggling as well, and they need that attention too, because if you want to encourage them to stay in school and graduate, then they might need that extra help. Early literacy is something that needs to be brought up and hit at the early grade levels, because with all the state standardized testing now, the reading portions are above their grade levels. So what the state wants us to do is that Like if they are in second grade, the students are reading at a second grade level or above a second grade level. They cannot be below. So that's something else that's really big within the state right now, and it needs to be hit. Also within Alliance, we have, I don't know if you guys have heard, but Mount Union and Alliance teamed up, and they now offer the top 10 students of each graduating class a full ride scholarship to Mount Union, besides room and board. So the students always have that option too, to take, and then they would have their college paid for. Also within Alliance, the 9th graders get iPad Airs, 10th and 11th graders get iPad Minis, and 12th graders, like I said, if they're in an AP course, they get an iPad Mini, but if not, then they have to bring their own device. Our last idea we had was grants. The grants would be applied by Alliance City Schools, and then if the Alliance City Schools receive the grant, then they could use that money to use for different things, such as more technology, or other classes, or even what we thought was sports, so kids can get involved and they wouldn't just have to go to school, they would always have that extra thing after school to look forward to, where they didn't need to worry about school or their work, but they rather just hang out with friends and have a good time.
So the follow-up is very important because we can instill all these programs, but if they don't work, then they're not doing any good. We can go back and look at the state report cards from year to year and see what areas are improving or getting worse. And we can also compare them to other school districts in the area with similar demographics. So, and see what they're doing that works and get ideas from them. And like the nutrition survey, we could have several different ones and distribute them to students, parents, faculty, even community members to just get input and see what areas can be improved on.
Any questions?
Would you put that website that
Yep.
you stopped taking? Because I was gonna ask a few about your sources, but maybe I've seen that. All right, interaction time.
Yes, Lauren?
For the people that aren't education majors, did it surprise you about the poverty level of Alliance compared to the national average?
Yeah, I was shocked. I didn't think it was going to be that high. Like, I mean, I'm not from the area either, and I've only been here for 3 years now, but I was very shocked. But the programs that they have to implement it between Mount Union and the schools alone is tremendous, I think.
I wasn't surprised. Maybe if I was a freshman and just got to Mount Union, I would be, but just being here over the 4 years, I've talked to other people like Abby Honaker, and she's a good source about the statistics for Alliance.
I was not surprised.
I'm not an education major, and I live like 20 minutes away, so I knew some of the situation. I knew it was pretty bad. I didn't know just how bad it was, but it also surprised me on the other end to see like how many programs they actually do have. So I guess that's a step in the right direction.
Is there a way that you assess these programs to see whether they are having the intended effect?
I believe a lot of them is just surveys, like asking the parents if it helped their student, and talking to like the cooperating teachers and the people that are the head of those programs, I guess you would say, and seeing what we could do more and what they could do more, and kind of like meeting in the middle type of thing. I know the scholarship fund is only, this is the second or third year, so it's fairly new, the full ride scholarship to the University of Mount Union, so.
Do you know how that's funded? Is that funded through Mount Union Endowment or something?
I'm actually not totally sure on that one, but I could easily find out.
I'm not sure, but
I think.
in the admissions office they talk about it all the time, and I think it's through like some kind of alumni donations and, yeah, they just kind of round up the money.
It's amazing, really.
You guys were mentioning like your cures and everything like that, but with like the situations you guys were explaining with the single parent household or the grandparent household, or even the parents who aren't good influence on their children, like how long do you expect, or like when would be like a reasonable timeline for you guys like to start seeing changes? Because a lot of times you can do all, like for those of you who are education majors or who work in youth programs, you know how difficult it is to deal with children who don't have a good home life. And so like, do you expect it to be like an immediate change, or how do you think that would work?
Personally, I don't think it's gonna be an immediate change at all, especially within Alliance, because going over our research, we found that in Alliance, most of it is generational poverty, which means 2 or more generations have been in poverty, and that's like, people say that that's like, there's no way of getting out of generational poverty once you're in, because you just don't have the sources to get out. So I think most of it is, even though there might not be a final cure for it, it's helping that child and encouraging them to go to school and to try their best to get out of the situation that they have.
Kelsey has a question, but she's videotaping, so she didn't want to ask it. The Stark County Hunger Task Force does weekend backpacks for elementary schools in Canton, but have trouble finding the funding for it. They have to rotate which children get them each week. How would you fund that program?
Well, like, when we talked about it and all that stuff, we thought about that too. I mean, my mom was a teacher, and anytime she could buy things for students, she was buying them and donating them to the office. So I think if you have to have a strong school system and strong teachers and administrators who want to better the school system, because a lot of that does come from donations. I don't know if you guys know, but teachers have to spend a lot of money in their classrooms. They do not get reimbursed for the things they spend, or for the money they spend for their classrooms. So teachers just do it out of the kindness of their heart. They want the best for their children. I think that's a big thing. Akron Public Schools is in uniforms, so I know anytime uniforms go on sale, teachers buy them and give them to the office, and that's just how they do it, is by donations. So.
In my area, they do the backpacks too, and there's churches that will sponsor a classroom. They handle taking the donations and packing the bags on Friday afternoon, and just drop them off at the school.
Do they find that there's trouble getting the right students who are in need because of the fact that they have these single parent households where it's hard to get the parents, just from the teacher friends and colleagues who I know, those are the toughest students to get anything back from. So to send a questionnaire to the parents that admit their level of need, when it's hard to get them to even return permission slips and things like that, is it hard to identify who your needy population is?
As a teacher, you kind of know, especially like I'm middle school, so I'll know that from all the previous grades they had. Like maybe if you're a kindergarten teacher, it is harder for someone to figure it out, but you'll figure it out as time goes on. I think as a middle school teacher, you can talk to the previous teachers they've had and all your colleagues, and you'll know, because more likely than not, you're gonna also have a sibling from that family, so people figure it out.
So a lot of responsibility falls on the teachers in a city with a lot of poverty. Important thing to be aware of. How currently is funding for fine arts and sports programs? Is it hard for a student who lives in poverty to have access to that? To play an instrument or to play a sport?
It depends if the school levy passes or fails. If a school levy passes, then it's a lot easier for them to play the sport, but it's also like, maybe with the band, they can rent an instrument from the school, which is technically free of cost because it does belong to the school. But with sports, you might need to buy your equipment, like your cleats and practice things and things like that. So that might be harder for a student. But if the levy fails, then schools typically go to pay to play, which means you have to pay a certain amount to play that sport or be in that extracurricular activities such as like band or cheerleading or drama. So.
Does anybody have any experience with how this works at your hometown and your schools, or do people support that? Well, I would imagine there are
The
communities who
school
would not.
beside me, they had to play, I think they have pay to play for it's almost been 4 years now. And just to do swimming, it was over $1,000.
Wow.
So a lot of the sports teams downsized tremendously over the past couple of years.
No, I was gonna say the same thing. A school next to ours has had pay to play since we were early high school, and the reason the levy fails, as everybody knows, is it goes on a ballot, and then the taxpayers in that district choose not to pass that levy. So it's really a discrepancy between trying to get people to pay for, the education and sports and extracurriculars, and then not having it, and those kids don't have that option. That area that I'm talking about is kind of impoverished anyways, and the school district wasn't doing so well before, and then after the levy passed, it basically kind of shot down all the kids.
There's a bunch of different schools around us that are pay to play, but they're all different. Like, some of them you pay like $250 per sport. Or some of them, it's like, I know Utica, that's a school near us, is like you pay, it's like $500 for your first sport, and then for each additional sport after that, like it's like $20. So it like all depends on like the school, and some schools are like $25 a sport because they do have funds to pay for those kinds of things. things. It just depends on, like you said, taxpayers who get the levy passes.
And it's just hard too, because like what you guys are saying with your action plans, like those are all great things. It's just a matter of getting people in the, 30 or 48 convinced to actually pay for that kind of stuff, because like there's no free lunch, so like that money just doesn't come out of nowhere. So that's tough. Like it becomes really, really tough, especially when you, like you said, generational poverty. When an area is stuck in that, it's hard to get funding to go to that, to kind of amp it up.
Do you have a question?
No, they pretty much hit on it.
So my high school was pay to play, so were you done talking?
Yeah.
That's the way we come off. But my high school was pay to play, so I think after the junior and senior year, but it was like, I think only $250 to $300, and then, but they had a thing for like kids with reduced lunch, it was a lot cheaper, and then if you had like no costs on their lunch, it was free for you, so that was.
Some way to
Yeah.
subsidize.
I'm from the Stark County area, and it's really interesting because there are some very affluent districts, and then there are some very impoverished districts. And it's really interesting to see how like the schools handle like pay to play and like arts and stuff like that. But for the most part, like what Gabby said and just basically what everyone else said, it's interesting to see the more affluent districts, if they care about education, they also care about like extracurriculars. So they're more than likely to pass their levies, while other districts always struggle passing their levies and they don't have the funding, but yeah, so they have to have pay to play. And I just think it's really interesting to see the differences.
Going off what Lauren said, I went to a very small school and it was a huge football town. So when levies came around, people wanted to pass so the football team could continue to play. But when it looked at academics, they didn't really care about it, so it failed for like 4 times straight. And they actually tried to like slide it on the ballot one time, so only the people that like kind of would pass it would go and vote, because it was getting pay to play. And actually, since my school is so small, 7th and 8th graders also have to pay to play sports. Because my brother was in 7th grade, this just happened last year. I think it was $250 per sport, but a $500 cap. So no matter how many sports you played, if you played 1, you were only paying $250. But if you were playing 2, you paid $500. If you played 3 sports, you were still paying $500. So that was a big deal. But the thing that kind of like woke up my community is that it was affecting the junior high too. And those people, like those kids were paying to play, so our sports were starting to suffer. And that's what I personally think got us to pass the levy, which I hate because my dad is the high school principal and that's not how my family thinks. We think academically, and that's why I'm going into education. I'm not going for the sports, so.
Okay, this is kind of a dumb question, and someone might have said it already, but, what are you paying all that money for? Cause like at my school, I've never even heard that you had to pay to play sports.
You pay like for busing, cause you have to bus everyone to all the away games. You pay for like, sometimes you have to pay to get in like tournaments, like sometimes you pay like per sport to play in your league. It just depends on like where you live and like what you do. And sometimes like you pay enough money at a school, they provide you with new uniforms. Like if you don't have like an athletic boosters program, like that's what funds your new uniforms or like any equipment you need, or like for softball, or everything that if we were pay to play, or I know the schools near us that were pay to play, it funded like all of the, if they needed new bases, if they needed chalk for their field, like anything that you think that was associated with the sport, they had to pay for it. Yeah, because nothing buys that for you.
Referees and umps as well.
I was just gonna say,
Referees and umps.
Does any of that money go toward paying the coaches?
No, the coaches are employees of the school, so they get paid by the school.
But, so their extra stipend or whatever to be
Yeah.
that coaches all through the school?
And one way you can get around that, just our mentality, because we're the same high school, is that we're really fortunate, because like, I think it was like something like 10 years ago, our district, kind of like what you were saying, like, kind of slid something in to where it's in legislation now that we never have to deal with the levy again. It basically said that from now on, anybody who lives in the district, no matter if you have students who go to school there or not, you pay part of your income tax goes right to the school.
The
Not
state of
necessarily-
Indiana's like that.
Yeah.
The state of Indiana has no
But there was like a
sports.
lot of people who were real pissed about it.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it was like a real secretive thing. They didn't advertise it anywhere, nothing, and people went to vote and it was just there.
Right. But
So
yet-
anyone who was against it didn't go vote because they didn't know it was on the ballot, and people were really mad about it.
But yeah, it's been like one of the best things for our district. Like our district, I mean, we're a really small country school and it's doing really well. That's really interesting.
What do you think about the to assess a school? Because, okay, so 10 years from now, you'll be married, starting your families, deciding where to buy your first house. And I personally just moved last year, coming to an area that I'd never lived in before. So one of the things that was really important was to look at the school districts. However, a lot of the professors whose children are in the Alliance school districts that the whole story is not in the report card.
Right.
Because Alliance looks terrible on the report card, but there's a lot going on at the school that are great programs, that are great resources for the students. So what do you think about using the report cards?
To choose a school, I do not believe in it at all. Like you said, if you looked at Alliance's report card, you wouldn't know all the advances that they have. You wouldn't tell that they had AP courses, or that their technology department is one of like the greatest in the Stark County area, actually, especially around between like Marlington and Louisville, especially with close schools, West Branch. They have so many grants that for their technology department that it is just it took off in a good direction, and it kind of started to blow schools out of the water because they were advancing so quickly and other schools were not.
So how would you recommend then for families moving into the area to determine a school district? What is a good measure of a school district?
I would ask around personally. That's just the biggest thing, knowing people in the school district or even teachers within the school district, because teachers within the school district are not gonna sugarcoat things for you. They're gonna tell you exactly how it is and what their problems are, or if the administration is good or bad, or what they like and what they dislike about the school district.
No one's ever gonna, like Alexis said before, no one's ever really gonna tell you like the strong support that like the teachers or even like the lunch ladies have like within the school district. You just have to see that kind of thing for yourself. Like my grandma was a lunch lady at our high school for a long time, and she'd bring $5 in her back pocket every day for those kids whose parents didn't even care to fill out the papers for them to get free lunch. So they didn't get lunch because they didn't have any money and their parents didn't even care to fill out the paper. So she'd buy like 2 students lunch every day just because she knew they'd come through the line and she didn't want them to go hungry, so she just gave them lunch. And there's people like that who don't even care to fill out the paperwork so you can get free lunch. And she could, yeah, she could. She was found it.
Kristen, for the service learning, are there examples of this in schools around, and what age do they start?
Actually, we do it in my high school, and it's for all seniors. It takes the coverage of 2 credits. You get a social studies credit as well as an English credit your senior year. And the setup is you're in the classroom 3 days a week, so Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then the other 2 days a week you are supposed to be out in the community doing community service. So the one thing that I did was I was seniors helping seniors, and I went out and helped the senior citizens of our community. Or even if you bring it back down, or we did talk about seniors who are in poverty as well, but if you want to bring it back down to the education program, we had a ton of kids that would go down to our elementary school and they would tutor kids, they would help teachers, or we'd have them go out into the community, into different schools and help them. Like my sister was placed at an autistic school and she loved it. She shadowed an occupational therapist for a couple of weeks, and then she did intervention specialist, and so she was working with autistic kids her entire senior year. And it not only benefited the school that she was in, but she's also interning. She is going to major in intervention specialist in college now. So it helped her as well as the community.
So is it a requirement for all students in the high school to take that class, or you sign up if you're interested?
It's optional. The majority of seniors do it because it is so beneficial. And like some of the things, like it isn't just about going out and doing community service, it's also raising awareness. Some of the things we'll do is we'll go as a class to a soup kitchen in the local area, or we'll do Shantytown, where you stay the night in the box. You can't shower for class the next day. Then you get Dale donuts for breakfast. We usually do that in September, October, so it's kind of cold out. Sometimes it's raining. We'll do, I think they changed the name of it. I think it's walk and roll or something, and it's a huge thing where you do students with disabilities, or if you're in a wheelchair, we'll have a big basketball game for it. We'll do our senior team versus the wheelchair team, and then we'll have a bunch of different booths with educational flyers and different things you can learn about it, so you can walk and raise awareness about it as well.
Was your school a public or a private school?
We're a public school, but we're a very small school, so a lot of our events are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very successful. And even each student, I think you pair up with a team of like 4 or 5 kids, and you put on your own brand But I mean, even in the Alliance community, if we implement something like that here on campus and in the Alliance High School, it would be wonderful. I mean, APO does it's a service learning or service fraternity here on campus, and they do so much stuff with the community as well that it could do something like along those lines too.
That sounds like that would be a great, somehow part of the integrated core, you know, like that could be a, I don't know how you would incorporate it, but. Are there any statistics about how poverty makes it more challenging to succeed in school? Did you find anything there?
I didn't find any statistics per se, but it did say that because you are brought up in a lower income family, that they don't have the money, the funds to provide you with simple books or simple educational tools that everyone grows up with. So you're already behind the majority of your peers. And then as you get into school and you start learning, you still don't have the funds that the majority of the other people have for you to succeed.
I wonder how would research that? I mean, that wouldn't be, it's not like teachers have this standing research requirement, so who would be somebody in the community who would say, we've implemented all of these programs in Alliance, are they helping improve students' academic success? Or are we kind of just throwing money away?
I'd say the school board. I mean, your education, that's your main topic, but in my opinion, I'd say the school board.
I think someone that can look closely at the community and the school, just not one or the other. So I think the school board is a good decision. If you wanted them kind of like the statistics nationally, there is an author who I can't remember the name of right now. She is like top-notch, passionate about poverty in schools and basically almost how to try to cure it. Cannot think of her name right now. And we looked at some of her books in my Many Faces of Poverty class that I took last year, which also had service learning in it actually. But we looked at some of her statistics, and it's just kind of mind-blowing about how many children in the United States are living in poverty and how many of them don't have the food that they need or the shelter or anything like that. So I just don't remember her name.
That would be a good resource for somebody's final paper if you're taking this topic, is to see what she says. Take that, do you agree with it? Do you think she's right on? Do you think there's some flaws in her thinking? You know, that type of thing. Just lost my train of thought. Figures. Well, here's another question while I try to regain it. This is for the class. We have another group who will be talking about how the public schools provide services to students with disabilities. So we're trying to talk about how the public schools have to be all things for all people. And do you think that that's even possible? Public schools have to have extra programs for the gifted so that they're challenged enough, and they have to have the right programs to bring the students who aren't as good along, and they have to have funding to support the students who are impoverished and ways to teach the students who have disabilities. That's a lot of burden on the public school system. Do you think that it's possible to find solutions for the public schools to be all things to all people?
No, I don't think so, because if you did find solutions for all those, we wouldn't have problems like school shooting that we're gonna talk about, and stuff like that. There's like, no one can, I don't think, like, as much as you work for them, there's no, like, completely perfect world.
That, and, like, you look at the really, really, like, okay, for us, for instance, like, we're a rural school, but we still did really well, like, the schools provide a lot of different things, but if you look at really, really, like, inner city impoverished schools, like, they're having trouble getting funding for students who excel, like, they're having trouble getting funding for teachers to just even go teach there, let alone the students are, not doing so well, or the, ones with disabilities, so that's really, really tricky to get funding for a district who doesn't get state funding because their test scores are low or anything like that, so it's tough to find a solution for that.
I think that's kind of like a loaded question in the fact that yes, schools can do it, but it's to the degree that they can do it with the funding. It's absolutely can be done, but it's also knowing that, like, I'm sorry, but low socioeconomic status, like, schools are not going to be at the same standard as affluent school districts. So yes, I do believe that every school district can do this and every teacher can do it, but it's just realizing that, putting it into perspective, that everyone is not going to be the same. So
I think this would be an interesting final paper topic too, is to look at ways, at proposals that are out there. Should we change radically the way that we fund public schools? Should we change the way that we run public schools by, with charter schools? I think that that's one of the reasons why charter schools came about, is to try to be that specialty option for students who have specialty types of needs. So is that a viable solution? Should we change the way that we fund schools? How do other countries do it that may or may not work? That'd be an interesting solution, or an interesting paper, is to look at possible solutions.
You also have to be careful too, because if a school district is so low for so many years, then the state kind of comes in and tries to take over the schools. Like Youngstown is actually in the midst of this right now, and they're trying to fight the state to keep their school district their own. Because if they lose, then all Youngstown city schools will become charter schools, and the state will basically own them. So Youngstown is in the midst of it right now, and the next is actually Akron Public Schools. So that's something to kind of keep an eye on. It's quite interesting.
So who at the state level monitors those schools then? Is there like a state?
It's the Ohio Department of Education, but like Lauren and Rachel and I have mentioned before, the people that sit on the Ohio State Board of Education, there's a good chance that they do not have any education background. So they just are kind of putting their opinions in and thinking that they're doing what's best, but yet they don't know about education, or they have never taught within the school district. So they're putting their opinions in, and that might be what they think is best, but as on the teacher side of things, teachers know that that's totally wrong.
Kind of going off what you said, I'm from Youngstown. I didn't go to Youngstown City Schools, but I lived in the district to go to them. And when I was in high school, they had a high school, middle school, and elementary school on each side of town, north side, east side. And they cut it down to one. And the high schools on the west side, and then the middle schools on the south side. But they're not called elementary schools anymore. The elementary school is called the School of Excellence, and it's kind of like a charter school now. They don't the teachers there now they don't have to have degrees, and it's kind of just a free for all there now. And my brother went to one of the high schools for a year, and my parents took him out because he wasn't learning anything really.
I think that's gonna be a hard thing too, as we implement a bunch of solutions across the board, because we feel like it's a system in need. So a lot of people are coming up with solutions and implementing them, and it's gonna be hard to know what are good solutions and what aren't, and what's working and what isn't. We'll have to figure out how we determine that, especially as you wanna send your children to a school where they'll do well.
Are the people who sit on the board of the Ohio Department of Education elected?
Lauren, yes.
Yes, as far as I know.
That's a good question, because I would assume that they are, but I don't know that for sure.
I would say one of them is appointed by the governor. Certain positions are appointed, but I would say some of them have to be elected.
I do wonder how that works.
That is interesting, because if there are so many teachers against the people that sit on the board at the Ohio Department of Education, if they are elected, who's electing them? And if they are appointed, then there's nothing we
It's
can
hard to
really do
know at
about
a
it.
state level who those people
Right.
are, they'll just be a name on the ballot, do you really know what they'll stand for?
Right.
I have one more question, for your sources where you say that minorities are suspended 3 times more than,
Yeah.
what is the source for that?
It was Department of Justice and Department of Education that were doing a study a year or two ago. They took from every school district in the country.
In the country, so it's a national statistic from a reputable source, which I figured it was, I just wondered what it was. One other thing, for the single parent families, do they take into account do they break that down as to who the child is with? Is it a family of divorce? Is it a single parent who was always a single parent, that type of thing?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think it just said single parent, so by divorce or never married or anything like that, that's all classified as just single parent.
And I don't know that would make a difference at all, I just wondered, divorce, you might have 2 single parents who are working together, but at least there's another potential of somebody else in that house.
Some of those statistics though, can they be a little fudged, because you can have a single parent who is not married to their significant other, but they're doing just fine, they're just living together, they're not married. Because
Right.
technically that's still a single parent. Or you can have, and you have people who are divorced, but they do have another significant other, and they're this child is being supported by 3 incomes, but technically it's a single parent, right?
Yeah.
For free lunch and stuff, all single parents.
yeah, I know some people that actually like do play the system. I don't know them personally, but I've heard stories where they do that. So then when their child goes to college, they get more money
Yeah.
from like the FAFSA and all that kind of stuff. Where if you were in a 2-parent home, my parents are both educators, and it doesn't bother me to say that I get no money. And I mean, as people know, educators don't make that much money, but to the government, that's enough that I get nothing. So I know there are people that do play the system, and even, I actually heard of a story where there was someone in high school, they went to a private school and they played the system just so they could get a full ride to a private high school. Instead of.